The Time Traveler's Wife Summary, a love story built out of order. Audrey Niffenegger's 2003 novel. The Time Traveler's Wife is a romance with a science fiction engine, but it runs on something more ordinary and brutal: absence. Henry DeTamble does not choose to leave. His body yanks him out of the room, out of the year, and out of his own life. Clare Abshire does not travel at all. She lives in the straight line that Henry keeps puncturing. The book asks a deceptively simple question: what does commitment mean when time will not hold still? Henry and Clare's marriage is not tested by temptation as much as by logistics, dread, and the slow grind of waiting. Love becomes a calendar problem that still has to feel like love. Niffenegger tells the story in alternating first-person voices, jumping across decades with date stamps that make every scene feel both immediate and already gone. The result is intimate and unsettling. You keep watching moments become memories while the characters are still inside them. The story turns on whether love can survive a life lived out of order. Key points. The Time Traveler's Wife is a novel about Henry DeTamble, a Chicago librarian who involuntarily time travels, and Clare Abshire, the artist who builds a life around his unpredictable disappearances. Clare meets an older version of Henry as a child, so her beginning with him happens long before Henry's. The story explores how a relationship changes when one partner's body, safety, and presence cannot be relied on. The romance is shaped by foreknowledge. Henry and Clare learn pieces of their future before they live it. The novel treats time travel like an illness, exhausting, dangerous, isolating, and often humiliating. Friendship and jealousy matter. Their social circle absorbs the shockwaves of their unusual marriage. Parenthood becomes a major emotional and ethical pressure point, not a sentimental add-on. Full plot. Spoilers start here. Here is the full plot summary with spoilers. This section includes the ending and the major late revelations. Act 1. Setup and inciting incident. Henry DeTamble grows up with a secret that is not really a secret because it keeps happening. He time travels involuntarily, pulled into other moments by something inside him that he cannot negotiate with. The trips are physical, not magical. He loses calories. He gets injured. He arrives without clothes or possessions. Survival becomes part of his personality, and secrecy becomes his habit. As a child, Henry is first forced to understand that his life will not move in one direction. He meets older versions of himself who teach him the practical rules: where to hide, how to steal clothes, how to avoid being caught, how to endure. Time travel turns Henry into his own caretaker, but it also turns him into his own witness. Some of the hardest moments are not adventures. They are returns to trauma, including the violent event that kills his mother and marks him with grief that never gets to finish. When Henry is an adult, he has built a functional surface life in Chicago. He works as a librarian at the Newberry Library. He has friends. He dates, including a long, unstable relationship with Ingrid, whose attachment to Henry is tangled up with his constant disappearances. Henry tries to want normalcy, but normalcy requires continuity, and he does not have it. Then Clare Abshire walks into Henry's workplace in 1991 and tells him, with joy and certainty, that she has known him for years. Henry is stunned because he has never seen her in his life. Clare explains that she met Henry in a meadow near her family home when she was a child. A future version of Henry appeared there repeatedly, visiting her across her childhood and adolescence. Clare grew up with Henry as a fixed point in her imagination, not as a fantasy, but as a person who kept showing up. For Clare, the relationship has already begun. For Henry, it has not even started. This mismatch becomes the real inciting incident. The couple is emotionally out of sync from the first page of their shared present. They fall in love anyway, but their love is haunted by two competing truths. Clare feels chosen by fate. Henry feels trapped by it. What changes here is that Henry realizes he is not only traveling through time, he is traveling into someone else's life. Act 2. Escalation and midpoint shift. Henry and Clare begin building a relationship in the normal direction, but the past keeps interfering. Henry continues to time travel. Clare continues to wait. The waiting is not passive. Clare learns routines, What to do when Henry vanishes, how to manage fear when he returns injured, how to cope with the humiliation of his naked arrivals, and how to structure a life that keeps being interrupted. She becomes the keeper of the household's continuity, the person who has to remember what happened last week because Henry might have missed it. Their social world complicates the intimacy. Friends like Gomez and Charisse do not treat Henry's condition as charming. They see the collateral damage, especially when Henry's absence leaves Clare alone at the moments when support is most needed. Gomez, in particular, carries feelings for Clare that sharpen the triangle without turning it into a simple affair plot. Clare's life contains other possible futures. She keeps choosing Henry anyway, which makes the costs of that choice more visible. Marriage does not solve the problem. It formalizes it. Clare is now legally and socially tied to someone who can disappear at any time, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for days. Henry tries to give Clare stability through information. He shares what he knows about when he will appear in her childhood. He gives her dates. He gives her a kind of schedule for the unpredictable, but that schedule is a double-edged gift. It provides comfort, and it creates obsession. Clare can start counting down to moments before they happen, and counting down is another form of waiting. The midpoint shift arrives as the couple tries to expand their life into the future by having a child. They want the ordinary anchors, a family, a shared project, and a home life that grows instead of resets. But Henry's condition makes reproduction a gamble. Clare suffers repeated miscarriages, each one a brutal reminder that their love has biological consequences. The novel does not treat this as a montage of sadness. It treats it as a grinding, specific trauma that changes how Clare sees her body and how Henry sees his inheritance. Henry and Clare consult Dr. Kendrick, seeking a scientific explanation for what sounds like an impossible story. The attempt to medicalize Henry's condition does not make it disappear, but it reframes it. Time travel becomes a diagnosis, not a destiny. That shift matters emotionally. A destiny can feel romantic. A diagnosis can feel cruel. Eventually, after multiple losses, Henry chooses a vasectomy to spare Clare more pain. It is one of his clearest acts of agency. He cannot control where he goes, but he can control what he might pass on. Yet even here, time undermines the idea of a clean decision. A version of Henry from earlier in his timeline visits Clare, and she becomes pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy holds. Their daughter, Alba, is born. Alba inherits chrono impairment, but with a crucial difference: she has more control than Henry ever did. Alba's existence is both relief and threat. She is proof that life can grow inside this disorder. She is also proof that the disorder will not end with Henry. Henry's time travel also takes him forward to meet Alba before she is born in his present. On a school field trip, he encounters his 10-year-old daughter and learns the most terrifying piece of information. Yet, he will die when Alba is 5. Time has been threatening Henry all his life, but now it has a date-shaped weapon. What changes here is that their love shifts from "will this work" to "how do we live with what we know?" Act 3, Climax and Resolution. With Alba's birth, the household gains joy and a new kind of stability, but the story darkens because the future closes in. Henry understands that his body is aging into higher risk. Time travel is not getting kinder. He is also carrying new vulnerabilities. He is a father. Every disappearance now has a witness who will remember it, not just a wife who endures it. The novel builds its final tension through inevitability rather than mystery. Henry travels into a frigid night and becomes trapped in a place where he cannot quickly find shelter. He returns to his present with severe frostbite, and the damage is permanent. His feet are amputated. The amputation is more than a shock event. It is a narrative statement. The disorder is not poetic. It is bodily. It takes pieces of him. Now the condition becomes even deadlier. If Henry time travels without feet, he cannot run. He cannot escape dangerous situations. The ability that once made him oddly resilient now makes him fragile. Henry and Clare understand what this means. There is no heroic solution. There is only the attempt to gather love into the remaining time. On New Year's Eve 2006, Henry experiences what the book has been foreshadowing. He time travels into the Michigan woods in 1984 and is accidentally shot by Claire's brother during a hunting moment. The injury is catastrophic, and Henry returns to his present with the wound. This is not a dramatic chase. It is a collision between ordinary life and freak timing. Henry dies in Claire's arms. After Henry's death, Claire's grief is complicated by the structure of their relationship. She has been losing Henry in fragments for years. Now she loses him in a final way that still does not feel final, because time travel has trained her to expect returns. She finds a letter Henry has left her, urging her to stop waiting, even as he also points to a moment far in her future when he will appear again. Claire raises Alba with the truth. Alba grows into her own relationship with time, one that is less chaotic than Henry's, but still isolating. Claire learns how to be alone without being empty, but the habit of anticipation never fully leaves her. In the final movement, the novel delivers its last quiet twist of the knife and the balm. When Claire is very old, Henry appears to her again. He is the same age he was at the end of his life, while Claire has lived decades beyond him. They reunite briefly, in a moment that is both gift and proof of what their love has always been, real and not synchronized. The story ends with Claire still holding space for Henry, not as a denial of reality, but as a recognition that their reality has never been a straight line. Analysis and themes. Theme 1. Love as asymmetry. Claim. The novel argues that love is often experienced unevenly, even when it is mutual. Evidence. Claire lives every hour of Henry's absence in sequence, while Henry experiences her life in fragments. Their first meeting is two different scenes, depending on whose timeline you're in. Even their knowledge is uneven, as Claire grows up with Henry's visits while Henry has to catch up to a relationship that already shaped her. So what? Many relationships contain hidden asymmetries. Who waits, who initiates, who carries the emotional logistics, who gets to leave and return. The book makes that imbalance visible by turning it into literal time. Theme 2. The body as the price of the plot. Claim. Time travel is treated as a physical disability, not a superpower. Evidence. Henry arrives naked, hungry, injured, and exhausted. He steals clothes not for flair but for survival. Over time, the condition escalates into irreversible harm, including catastrophic cold exposure and amputation. The story keeps tying intimacy to vulnerability, because Henry's body is always at risk. So what? The novel resonates with anyone who has lived with chronic illness, seizures, panic, addiction, or any condition that creates unpredictable gaps. It shows how love becomes caregiving without ever saying the word. Theme 3. Waiting as a form of agency. Claim. Claire's waiting is not passive, it is a life strategy with moral weight. Evidence. Claire uses Henry's visits as a scaffolding for her identity, but she also chooses Henry in the present when she could choose someone else. She makes art. She builds routines. She pursues motherhood despite repeated losses. Her life is not a blank space around Henry's appearances. It is a full life forced to absorb disruption. So what? Waiting is usually framed as weakness, especially in romance narratives. The book reframes it as labor, planning, endurance, self-control, and the decision to remain open even when certainty is impossible. Theme 4. Fate, foreknowledge, and the illusion of control. Claim. Knowing the future does not give the characters power, it gives them dread. Evidence. Henry learns key facts ahead of time, including his own death. Claire receives dates of visits that become both comfort and obsession. The story repeatedly shows that foreknowledge changes how they feel, not what happens. The future remains stubbornly intact. So what? Modern life is full of predictive signals, health risk scores, algorithmic forecasts, performance metrics, surveillance, and timelines that claim to show what is coming. The book suggests that prediction can become another kind of prison if it replaces living. Theme 5. The ethics of intimacy across time. Claim. The romance is built on a strange ethical paradox. Claire cannot consent to the shape of her life before she understands it. Evidence. Henry's older self becomes a formative presence in Claire's childhood. Claire's expectations and desires are shaped by those meetings. When Henry meets Clare in the present, he is entering a relationship whose groundwork he did not lay consciously, but which his future self already created. So what? The novel forces readers to confront uncomfortable questions about influence, imprinting, and power. It does not resolve those questions cleanly. Instead, it asks whether love can still be real when its origins are structurally unfair. Theme 6. Inheritance and the fear of repeating yourself. Claim. Parenthood in the novel is both hope and terror because it carries the disorder forward. Evidence. Clare's miscarriages reflect the biological cost of Henry's condition. Henry tries to halt that cost through a vasectomy, but time undermines linear causality. Alba is born with chrono-impairment, though with more control, turning the condition into a family legacy rather than Henry's private tragedy. So what? Many parents fear passing on more than genetics, trauma, addiction, instability, absence. The book turns that fear into a literal inheritance and asks what love owes a child when the parent's body cannot be fully trusted. Character arcs. Protagonist. Henry begins believing that survival is the same thing as living. His early self is trained by older versions of himself to steal, hide, endure, and detach. Over time, Clare and then Alba force Henry into a different belief. Presence matters more than control, and love is not proven by endurance alone, but by the willingness to be known. His clearest shifts happen when he stops treating the disorder as a private burden and starts treating it as a shared life that needs rules, honesty, and care. Clare begins believing that fate can be trusted. Henry's visits give her the feeling that love is promised, and she orbits that promise for years. By the end, Clare's belief becomes more grounded and harder. Fate does not protect you, but it does not erase your choices either. She learns to live without constant bargaining, to build a self that is not only waiting, and to accept moments as complete even when they do not last. Key secondary arc. Gomez moves from jealousy and longing into a more mature loyalty. He remains emotionally complicated, but his arc shows how a friendship can survive desire when it is forced to become honest. Craft and structure. What makes it work? The alternating first-person voices do more than diversify perspective. They stage the central conflict formally. Henry's sections often feel like survival reports, where he is, what he needs, what he lost on arrival. Clare's sections feel like continuity work, what the day was supposed to be, what it became, and what she has to hold together after Henry disappears. The date stamps are not just a timeline gimmick. They create dramatic irony and emotional compression. You can watch joy happen while knowing it is temporary. You can watch a fight happen while knowing a gentler version of the same couple exists elsewhere in the book. The structure simulates memory, non-linear, associative, and haunted by repeats. Motifs do a lot of the heavy lifting. Clothing is not sexy, it is safety. Libraries are not just backdrops, they are a metaphor for time as an archive you can visit but not edit. The meadow becomes the book's emotional laboratory, the place where childhood longing, adult reality, and the cruelty of time intersect. What most summaries miss. Most summaries treat the book as a clever romance with a time travel twist. The deeper move is that Niffenegger writes time travel like an illness and marriage like caregiving, without ever flattening it into a lesson. Henry's disorder produces the same relationship dynamics you see in real life, with partners who travel constantly for work, disappear into addiction, cycle through depression, or live with unpredictable medical episodes. The sci-fi element is a translation device that makes invisible labor visible. Another overlooked point is how the novel refuses the fantasy that true love fixes anything. Clare and Henry love each other intensely, but love does not stabilize Henry's body or make the future negotiable. Instead, the book shifts the definition of romance away from rescue and toward endurance, adaptation, and grief management. That is why the ending can be both devastating and strangely tender. It is not a victory over time. It is a relationship learning how to exist inside time's rules. Relevance today. The book maps cleanly onto modern relationships shaped by irregular presence, remote work across time zones, constant business travel, gig schedules, military deployments, and partners who work nights. Love becomes a planning problem before it becomes a feeling. It speaks to the reality of chronic illness and invisible disability. Unpredictable episodes force couples to build redundancy, contingency plans, and emotional resilience, even when outsiders keep asking why the person can't just be present. It anticipates the way technology turns life into timestamps. Calendar invites, location sharing, read receipts, and memories features all. Promise control over time, while also intensifying anxiety about absence. The infertility storyline lands hard in an era of IVF, genetic screening, and politicized reproductive care. The novel shows how medical language can collide with grief and how trying again can become a psychological trap. The story highlights unequal emotional labor in relationships. Clare carries continuity, the home, the waiting, and the recovery after each disruption. That imbalance mirrors how caregiving and domestic stability are still distributed unevenly in many households. The book echoes current debates about prediction and determinism, from algorithmic risk scoring to predictive policing to performance metrics. Foreknowledge often increases fear more than it increases freedom. It also speaks to identity in the age of versioning. People curate past selves through posts and photos, meet younger versions of themselves through archives, and feel split between who they were and who they are now. The novel literalizes that split through Henry's encounters with himself. Ending explained. Henry's death is not a puzzle twist. It is the endpoint of a condition that keeps escalating, and it arrives through a collision of bad timing and ordinary human action. The book has been teaching you that Henry cannot choose the moment of travel, cannot protect himself reliably, and cannot change the major fixed points of his life. The ending means that love does not defeat time, but it can outlast the damage time does. The final reunion, when an elderly Clare sees Henry again, does not erase the decades she lived without him. It also does not turn their story into a neat loop that solves grief. Instead, it confirms what the book has argued all along. Their relationship is real, even when it is discontinuous. The ending resolves the core emotional question by showing Clare's endurance as meaningful, not foolish. But it refuses to resolve the pain. Clare still has to live most of her life without Henry. The novel leaves behind an argument about commitment. Sometimes the most honest version of love is the one that keeps choosing a person even when the world will not cooperate. Why it endures. The Time Traveler's Wife lasts because it is not really about time travel. It is about what absence does to intimacy and what intimacy demands when absence cannot be prevented. It captures the unglamorous mechanics of devotion, calendars, apologies, fear, bodily vulnerability, and the constant work of rebuilding normal after interruption. This book is for readers who want romance that is emotionally serious and structurally inventive, and who can tolerate discomfort alongside tenderness. It may not work for readers who want clean moral certainty, a strictly linear love story, or science fiction that prioritizes rules over feelings. In the end, the novel insists that love is not proven by permanence. It is proven by return, recognition, and the daily decision to keep living when the person you love is not there. More insight, less noise. Subscribe and explore the full range at taylortaylor.co.uk.